Welcome, case makers near and far. I'm Dr. Tiffany Manuel, and I'm the CEO and founder of The Case Made. One of the best things about the work that I do is that I get to travel the globe and I get to hear amazing people who are doing the kind of things in their communities that are just so awesome. And when I hear great case making, there's only one thing that comes to mind: fierce. That's the energy of this series, and that's why I've invited you in. So come on in, take a listen. This is Fierce Case Making. So in just a moment, you are about to hear an amazing conversation that I just had with Rachel Heller, who is the CEO of CHAPA in Massachusetts. My goodness, there's so much goodness. You want to stick around to the very end because there's so much goodness about this. One, she was just talking about how because of case making, right, her whole team is talking differently, right, than they did before in ways that are pulling new champions forward. And not only are they talking differently, but they're hearing other folks repeat back to them, right, the very thing that they're talking about, which is really key in case making. That's a success metric. Like, are we talking in ways that are sticky enough that people on the other side, right, come back and are saying the same things to us, things that, right, in the same way. That is super important. There is a way to do this, folks. Case making works. And so take the time, listen to what she has to say. There's so much goodness. I could sort of run it down, but I'd rather that you listen to her. So take a moment, get a cup of coffee, sit down, take a chill, listen to the conversation. Great. Well, welcome everybody to Fierce Case Making. I'm talking today to Rachel Heller, who's the CEO of CHAPA, affectionately what I call CHAPA, and maybe some of you, which is the Citizens Housing and Planning Association in Massachusetts. So welcome, Rachel.
Thank you.
So glad to see you. So I want to start just talking about sort of how we first met. I think I had been brought into Boston to do a set of trainings with another housing organization, and you and some of your team were at that session. And I remember folks coming up to me afterwards saying, we got to have more of this. Like, wait. Where can we contact you? Like, what can happen then? And since then, we have together been on quite a journey of trying to figure out how to make a stronger case for abundant, affordable, safe, thoughtful housing in Massachusetts. So
That's right. Yeah. My whole organization has changed so much during our time together, and we really are speaking in such a different way. And I think a way that's really bringing in a lot more people to the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, I got to say, so whenever I do these sessions, I always start by asking people about the justice journey that they are on. So, at the Case Made, we only work with folks who are on a justice journey. Like they may be doing affordable housing or childcare or any number of ordinances they're trying to pass or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're on a much larger journey, right, to something that is about justice. And so tell us what your justice journey is.
Our journey, or my journey, is very aligned with CHAPA. My own personal journey is to have a future where everyone has a safe, healthy, affordable home in the community that they choose. It's a future where everyone can thrive, where we have addressed and redressed so many of the harmful impacts of housing policies throughout our history, and that everyone benefits from that we're all seeing that the world is a much brighter, healthier place when we all have a safe place to live. So that's the journey that we're on. And the exciting thing, I think, is that more and more people are seeing that we can plan for that kind of future, that it doesn't have to be just a dream, that we can actually make it a reality.
That's right. I love that. And I will say that it wouldn't be a case-making journey, right, if you weren't thinking about how you bring other people with you, right? In order to get there, we need lots of new champions in the work. And I want to say that one of the things that has always been, or has been really exciting to watch you and CHAPA on this journey, is how you have been really intentional about bringing new folks to the table, like bringing in folks like you were talking about the business community, really thinking hard about how you bring in, folks that are not traditional housers, folks who already care about housing. Like, you've been really intentional about that. And I've watched that journey over a number of years, and y'all have gotten really good. Like, the Case Made, we work with folks all over the country. And so I could spot like folks who are really doing like really fierce case making in that regard. And so I want to say to you, first of all, kudos because you've been on that journey and doing a great job of it.
Thank
But
you.
also talk about that. Like, what has that been like to really be intentional about bringing new folks, about bringing folks into a journey that they may not have just warm, been organically like kind of interested in from the very beginning. Like you had to bring them in, like, come on, like we need you, right?
Yeah.
What has that been like?
Well, first, just thank you. Those words from you are such high praise because everyone in our organization is constantly thinking about the principles of case making. We're always checking ourselves. We're always helping each other get better and better. So that means so much. And then, when it comes to bringing others in along and being very intentional about it, we have known for a long time that we can't make all the cases. We've been talking about housing. CHAPA's been around for over 50 years. We're always talking about housing. And that will get you so far. We have amazing programs in the state and amazing laws, and yet we're in a similar situation to people all over the country where we need more. We need to change the structures in which we're creating housing. And so we need more people. I have learned that I'm not the go-to voice on businesses or economic development or health. I need people who are from those fields to be able to talk about why housing is a health issue or why housing is a business issue. And so we've been thinking about how does housing impact people in all different aspects of their lives? And we're reaching out and we're talking with them, and we're finding that people very much see housing as part of what's impacting their work. I think the public health field has really been a leader in this. It has definitely helped us to learn how to talk to other fields. On their own, they identified housing as a social determinant of health. They see the impacts on people. That helped us to make connections, find the language. And now, we have so many businesses that are really struggling right now because they don't have the employees to fill shifts. They're worried they can't continue the customer service that they have. And we, after so much practice, we're now able to really connect with these business leaders on what's impacting them. And they're coming to the table and they're speaking up and it's making an impact. And so we think about this with arts. We think about this with education. And really part of it is, as we've learned from you, listening a lot. And that allows us to find those connections and to ensure that when people come to the table, it's really meaningful. It is coming from their own experience. It's coming from what they're seeing and how it aligns with our work. Whereas we're not necessarily the ones telling them or leading them. We're kind of coming there together.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. And I will say, it's funny, when I first started to do this work, specifically in the space of affordable housing, there really wasn't much kind of general appetite across the country for housing. We were still trying to get people's attention because the housing crisis hadn't got as big as it is right now, right? And so trying to get people on the train was a little bit tough. And we were trying to get just average everyday folks like, listen, we just need like people to like pack the city council meeting. We need people to like talk to developers and talk, right? All of those kinds of things. What's really been interesting to watch as housing has become a central issue. Like housing is the number one thing driving inflation today, right? People are like, oh, the cost of housing. How can I afford this? So many more audiences have come to the table, including some of the business leaders that you're talking about. And now I get a lot more calls at the Case Made and my team get a lot more calls around like, how do we bring even more businesses to the table? Because there's a perception they have more resources or at least have more willingness because they really get now, right? When people don't have a place to live, it's really hard to get stable, thoughtful, happy, healthy employees sitting at whatever desk, job, whatever it is, to do that. And the last time I was there in person in Massachusetts, we were on a panel together, and I love that you were talking about a particular. You're going to know this example. I think was out of Newton, where this business owner was, in the paper. You quoted him, and I love the quote. Can you share a little bit about that story, just about what he was talking about as a business leader, like having in the past opposed affordable housing and looking back went, that was not so smart. Like, say a little more about
Right.
that.
Sadly, it was a real neighborhood institution in a city just outside of Boston. And after 90 something years, the business was closing. And it's very sad. And I'm very impressed with the business owner to actually recognize what it was, even in his own journey, that contributed to the situation in the community. He talked about he'd been against all growth. He'd been against everything that had been proposed. And then he saw, as his business was closing, that other areas in the in the region were growing, and that businesses were doing better. And here he was, after 90 something years, his business was closing, and he saw the connection to saying no, and what it means to say yes, and what it means to understand that communities change over time, and the importance of adapting to that change and welcoming it. And so it's a sad story overall, but I'm always so impressed when people are able to speak about something that they may have changed their mind about. I know somebody else in my own community who was against a housing development. She was out there protesting with everyone else. 5 years later, she lives there and she loves it. And the wonderful thing about her is that's not the end of her story. She now tells other people about that she wasn't thinking about it in the right way. And she is so grateful to have a place that allows her to remain in the community. And so it's heartbreaking when you hear the stories of a business closing. But again, I'm just really impressed when people can take that and turn it into something for others to learn from. And it helps us all to see these cautionary tales, that we can do something different. We can plan that the future of housing does impact all of us, and it impacts our businesses, and impacts our health, and impacts our own lives in ways that we can't predict until we need new housing options.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so excited by what you just said because I think that is really at the core, from my vantage point, of case making. That sometimes we get into these conversations where we think, folks are opposed to what we're trying to get done, and there's a process of trying to convince folks, but there's a way to kind of help folks really grow into their role as leaders in a community that focuses them on the things that are most important and pulls them forward. And I just love that because I hate when we get into situations where people, some of the early messaging, for example, what some of the communications folks were trying to get. I remember I was at a not-for-profit many, many moons ago, and they had asked us they put a whole communications package together, and they wanted us to call out the villains, and developers are the villains, and to then call them out because they're greedy, and you can call out the public policymakers because they're making backroom deals. And I'm like, come on, y'all. Like, you can do that, but if you villainize all the folks that you actually need to get the work done, it doesn't make for a very productive relationship that pulls people forward and allows folks to grow into the thing that you want them to grow into so that you can get the work done. So I love that you said that there are lots of folks that you may meet on the journey, right, to justice, who, when you meet them, they may not be champions of the work, but case making, right, really engaging people, figuring out what is it that, allows them to connect and see their stake in what you're doing, can actually pull people forward. And then they may pull other folks forward, right, because they get excited about it, right?
That's
So
right.
I love that kind of process of just thinking about that and like seeing this as a journey, not just for you, but for all the folks that you're bringing forward and you're talking to, right? And not saying, this writing somebody off
Right.
simply because when you had a conversation with them initially, they weren't ready, right, to be part of it. Like, so if we think about all of our folks that we meet as potential champions, like, you just need more time.
Let it
You might be in the
percolate. It's
second
coming.
wave. It's coming. Just wait,
Right.
And especially right now in housing, where, again, like when we first started doing this work, I think there were a lot of folks who just were not even thinking about housing, wasn't on the radar. And now everybody's like, oh, housing, folks, we need housing. And so that's made a lot of opportunity come our way.
It has. And at the same time, it's such an interesting dynamic as more and more people are saying we need housing, we need it now. And yet it takes time to create the homes. And so we're bringing people in, and people have to stay along for the ride. It takes a while to change the rules. It takes a while to actually build the
Right.
homes. It takes a while.
That's
And
right.
so, but investing people in that journey, and that it's worth it.
Mhm.
That is I can see it happening. We're seeing it happen here. But
Mhm.
it's not going to change overnight. So really, when you're bringing people in, it is for the long haul.
Absolutely. And so tell me a little bit about what you see as the real opportunities in the space right now. I think if you were to ask me 10 years ago, what the opportunities in housing might have been, I was just saying, can we get people to think about affordability, like even for just workforce housing? Can we just get that lane happening, right? Can we get folks to really think about homelessness as a representation of the folks who need housing the most, because it's a visible representation of the fact that we aren't solving this for folks who, right, completely don't have it. But I think now there's just so many more options across the entire spectrum, from homelessness all the way out to middle income or attainable housing, as they call it, like the whole spectrum, like in every single area. I think there are opportunities to bring people forward. And even things like just redress. I mean, thinking about just segregation, it's not just that we need more housing, but we need to have it in ways that don't resegregate and divide us across race and class. Like, that's not, we know that that doesn't make for a healthy community. So when you're looking out at the place where we are now, right? What are you seeing as some of the most important and just great opportunities to bring new folks forward, to do some things that are really powerful and possible?
There's so many opportunities. I think right now, because housing is impacting so many people in ways that they never expected, whether it's they don't have the ability to downsize, or their kids can't live anywhere near them, or their business can't have employees around the clock. It is hitting people in a way that's allowing for a connection. And it's been interesting, in talking with some business leaders. Some business leaders are thinking more obviously about their own business at that point, and they may be paying people in a higher salary range. So they are thinking about, this group of people that they're trying to recruit and trying to keep in our state rather than seeing them go somewhere else. And that's a moment I have found to actually talk about the entire workforce. And I've seen some shifts happen there where someone's coming in and they're really thinking about the people who have a college degree, maybe a master's, and now they're seeing the world bigger because they are understanding, okay, if it's impacting these folks, it's a light is coming on about it's getting harder and harder, the lower income. And some of it is people will see others in a way that it helps them, right? Like during the pandemic, grocery store workers, we need these folks. And I really don't like to think about how people serve us as a reason to care, but it's a moment to make a connection. These are people that are part of the fabric of our community. Yes, they work at the grocery store, and we need grocery stores, we need cafes, and we need all these things that bring life. And if people can't be at those jobs, then we don't have those things that make the community what we want it to be. And I think the same with redress. This one is definitely a little bit harder as people need to confront the policies that have resulted in segregation and have resulted in racial inequalities and the racial homeownership gap and the wealth gap. And I think, the apprehension there is clearly people don't want to take on that responsibility. They don't want to think that they have been a part of that. And I think this is where I think about one of your principles about, blaming the systems. Our system has been set up this way. These were structures that we live in. And that's also what gives me hope, because if these were structures that we created, then we can create different structures that make sure everyone has what they need and we can all thrive. It's not you have so someone else doesn't get it. We can all have. We can create a new structure. So I see a lot of opportunities right now, and I've been really impressed in Massachusetts. Some of what's come out of the pandemic is work that started before it, but we've been able to create homeownership programs that really are aimed at narrowing the racial homeownership gap. The pandemic, as horrible as it was, gave us an opportunity. People could see the disparate impacts on communities of color. And that enabled us to create programs that served people living in these communities. And some of those were homeownership programs, some of them were rental assistance, and it's amazing to have that progress.
Love that. Love that. So talk a little bit about, so one of the things that I love when I now hear you talk, and I hear you talking in various venues and in front of audiences that you are trying to bring into this conversation with your case making. One of the things that strikes me is just the way, I would say, you have taken on this very sort of like, case early on aspirational kind of tone at the top of your conversation. And sometimes for a lot of our case makers, our community of case makers, it can be tough to turn your thinking around, to like start in a place that's appreciative, right? About what we already have and what we can leverage and what's the opportunity. And they're like, I know, Dr. T, but I there's so many problems. I feel like I have to talk about that. That's the thing that brought me to the table. And what I love about hearing you talk now is when you start talking about it, you start in a very different place. And I'm excited. I mean, that's the very thing that you're building energy at the very top of your conversation with folks, and talk about what that journey has been like, right?
Yeah.
And maybe even the reception that you get because of it, because your conversation now looks a lot different than a lot of the other folks who are, in the just generally speaking, in affordable housing in particular, or housing issues, where it's all crisis, crisis, crisis. Oh my God, we don't have enough. There's not enough to go around. What do we do? Scarcity everywhere. How do one, what's your journey been like to sort of get to that kind of conversation? And then what's been the reception when you start there versus other places?
Oh my goodness. Here at CHAPA, we look back a lot at some of our testimony or our statements from
Mhm,
a few years ago,
mhm.
and we just go, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, what we were scaring people. We were always coming in with a crisis. And what was interesting was not only does that shut people down, which we hear you talk about all the time,
Mhm.
but other people weren't feeling this crisis yet.
Yeah.
And so to them, it was okay. Maybe it's a crisis for someone else, but I don't know what
Right.
you're talking about, And
Right.
so now, when we start talking, it is so much more aspirational, bringing people in. We're connecting around a future where we can all imagine and would
Mhm.
love for it to be our future.
Mhm.
And it just brings people in such a different
Mhm.
way. Anytime we look
Mhm.
back, we cringe.
Mhm.
And now we're really proud of the way that we talk. We're proud. We can see more people coming to the table.
Right.
And one of the things that makes us proudest of all is when we hear other people using the kind of language that we are using.
Mhm.
Sometimes we wonder, did they get our deck? Are they using our deck? And
What?
it's becoming their own, but it is the same principles they've learned, and they're taking it on and they're doing it, and it's wonderful.
Mhm.
It's so much more joyful to do the work too, when
Mhm.
we're in a crisis. Yes, things are hard, but I want to be optimistic about our future. And it has gotten to the point where I was talking to a reporter recently, and they said, "What do you think is going to happen with this?" And I was very optimistic about it. He goes, "Yeah, you're always optimistic." And I said, "Well, it's optimism and a vision that is going to get us
Right.
to the future where everyone can thrive. So yes, I am optimistic. Don't
Mhm.
discredit that. That's what's actually going to get us where we need to go."
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And I heard you use a word there that's really interesting. I want to talk about. You heard you use joy. And it's so interesting because, when we're talking about these issues, and sometimes, especially at the case made, we talk about this is certainly a justice journey, but it also should be a joy filled journey. And folks are like, how can you talk about joy? And we're in the middle of the worst about housing crisis. And to your point, it's like, yes, yes, all those things are true. Yes. But you don't build people's energy and excitement by making them feel right bad about where we are. You don't build people's energy and excitement for the journey to push forward, right? When they feel like there's no tomorrow that they're working for, right? I always say every good coach, of any like sports team knows that you don't start the game, start the bring your players out right before the game and say, guys, this thing is awful. Y'all about to lose. This thing is going down, right? You bring them in, you say, come on. Even when you're playing a better team, right? You bring them in, you say, come on, guys, we can do this. This is our moment. People are counting us out. They're not counting us in, but they're about to be surprised because we can do this, right? And when you bring that kind of like Massachusetts, it's on people are counting us out. Well, we can do this, folks. They're saying we can't figure out and solve this, but it's solvable, right? We can do this. And so talk a little bit about that kind of just the joyfulness. I think there's a sense of joy that we ought to be bringing to justice work. And sometimes that when you have that kind of conversation and in your spirit, kind of people are like, not just that you're optimistic, but there's a joy that comes from my vantage point, like you were saying, having a vision, planning forward, figuring out what we need to do, bringing people together. That's exciting work that gets people ready to move. And talk about what that has been like for you in terms of just like I'm about to, this is about joy. This is not, you know. the death knell. This is about what happens for our future, and I'm excited about it.
Right. People want to work with others who are excited about doing the work. I
Mm-hmm.
think about when I'm trying to get someone to go to a hearing, or I'm asking someone to go to a local meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to go to something where like, we gotta go. The other side's gonna turn out like, sorry, that's how you're gonna spend your night. That's not really exciting. But if I say,
That's right.
hey,
That's
we have a
right.
moment here. Our community is about to make some big decisions, and your voice has an impact. Let's go. Let's go together. It's very
Mm-hmm.
different. Our whole team here, one of the things I love at CHAPA
Mm-hmm.
is how engaged everyone is. People are
Mm-hmm.
excited about the work. We do
Mm-hmm.
believe that a brighter future is possible. We have
Mm-hmm.
seen evidence of that. We have seen
Mm-hmm.
progress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when people come to our table, they are excited to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, yes, the work is hard. Yes, it absolutely is. And yes, people are living
Mm-hmm.
really difficult lives and trying to stay stable. But honestly, some of my most joyful work was working with a group called Homes for Families, which was made up
Mm-hmm.
of families who've experienced homelessness, service
Mm-hmm.
providers, and advocates all working together. We took on a campaign in Massachusetts to restore funding to our state
Mm-hmm.
rental subsidy program. This program is
Mm-hmm.
being obliterated. It served
Mm-hmm.
18,000 people at its height, funded $120 million. When we started the campaign, it was $24 million. It was dwindling. And
Yeah.
we went out, no one really knew who we were. They didn't have a lot of respect. The state house necessarily didn't know who we were. We found a freshman representative and he was enthusiastic and we
Mm-hmm.
all worked together to build a campaign. We got our first $1 million that year.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't a lot, but we
Mm-hmm.
saw that coming
Right.
together, we could do this. And the joy that came from this group, and to this day, it's
Mm-hmm.
20 years later,
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
program is well over $200 million a year now. It needs more, but it is rocking it. And it goes
Right.
back to the families
Mm-hmm.
who were homeless or experiencing homelessness,
Mm-hmm.
who they decided during school vacation week, we were going to
Mm-hmm.
go to the state house. We were going to have
Mm-hmm.
a cookie day. We were going to have fun with our advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
We had kids. Kids got to have cookies. We're going to bring them to the legislators. We're going to talk about the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program. 20 years later, that day happens every year. It's becoming
Mm-hmm.
now a big award. The legislators want that big cookie. They want to be the champion of the
Mm-hmm.
program. And it really was rooted in joy. If we'd all shown up and just said, we need help, like nothing's working, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
we would have had the same outcomes. And
That's
to
right.
this day, people remain so excited about that work.
That's right. That's right. Love that. So share a little bit. So you and I have been, thanks to you and some of your sort of partner organizations, you and I have been working on, or as part of a community of practice, a case making community of practice, which has been great. Like we're going through the process of not just the sort of advocacy work, but teaching the skills of strategic case making to a wider range of folks all across the state. Folks who have self-selected to be part of it, but have just said, "Yep, this is a skill set I need to have that can help me, right, accelerate the pace of change in this community to bring more champions to the work." Say a little bit about that. I know we're still in the middle of it, but it'd be great to hear you talk about, from your vantage point, why you thought it was a great time, right, to bring more folks to actually get the skill sets around case making, and then people's reception to that in terms of just being willing to come to the table in a moment of real change in Massachusetts.
I am so excited about this work with the permanent supportive housing providers, and whether they are the ones building it, doing the
Hmm.
services, advocates for it. It really has come from CHAPA's work of convening so many different stakeholders and
Hmm.
working with other wonderful organizations like the United Way, who've really been such great partners in this. As we have been working on building these resources for supportive housing and having
Hmm.
some victories at the state and federal level, we're still seeing in our communities supportive housing is having the hardest time. So developers were coming to us
Yeah.
and service providers, and they were saying, we just can't get this stuff cited. We are ready to go. 200 new apartments for people experiencing
Hmm.
homelessness. Everyone's frustrated with the tents that are getting set up, out in the park, and we can't make the connection. And
Yeah.
to CHAPA and United Way, we said, we got to do a case making cohort. And we started
Hmm.
talking with the developers, we started talking with service providers. They were so excited because
Hmm.
this has not been part of the toolkit that they have. And they've always gone to public meetings and they found ways to make it work, but it is harder than ever. And us all coming together is really providing each of these folks, some very experienced, some just learning, to pick up some new tools. And I think to be in this practice together, it is creating a support network too, where people are learning from each other, as well as learning with their own teams and learning from you. And so it's really creating an amazing space for people to learn how to do this work. With homelessness, it's hard. Like, it's always hard, and it's getting harder and harder. We have a lot more people experiencing homelessness. All the costs are going up. And now we have this group coming together, and we're finding that joy, I think, too. We're finding, okay, we can do this. We can do this together. We can learn some new tools. We're going to get those yeses. We're going to get more people to be joining us so that we're not doing this alone. We're going to give the tools to local leaders so they can be there with us. And we know that that's going to make a difference. So this group has been really phenomenal. And it came from them. I happen to know about CaseMaking from all of our work together. But that is what they were talking about. That's what they needed. And so I'm really excited about the journey. I know some are getting impatient. They want to know now how to do this. And one of the things I find myself saying is trust the process. It's going to get us where we need to go.
Exactly. I love that. And I think just in our last session, so for folks who may be watching this, part of how we teach this is a kind of skill based, going through all the principles, but then work on very particular skills. And one of the last skills that we worked on so far in the community of practice was just the art and science of the pivot, right? How do you pivot away from the stuff that people will bring that, is mostly just distractions from the work that has to get done. And oftentimes when people just hear all this stuff, especially permanent supportive housing, and you're talking about folks who are experiencing homelessness and you get all the sort of negative stuff. And so I feel like that skill set in particular is super important to some extent on the affordable housing side. And you can talk about, right, folks make a contribution. We want to have our nurses, teachers, blah, 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 engage, house, successfully. And people can kind of lean into that without so much of there's a little bit of it still, but not so much that we used to hear about, say, 10 years ago. Now they're like, yes, we have to get our essential workforce, right? But when you talk about folks who are experiencing homelessness, a different kind of conversation happens that brings in all these other issues, and the ability to take those comments, take those, frames, or take those narratives and turn this conversation back to what it means to create abundant housing opportunities for everybody, including those who today are unsheltered, is really a skill set, right? And so, my thinking about that is, how, just from your vantage point, what about learning that skill set? Like how we teach many skill sets, but that one in particular just feels like it's right for this conversation. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
That is my favorite in the whole suite of tools that you've given to us, the art of the pivot. And really listening to what people are saying and being able to connect with that. And it can be challenging because, to your point a moment ago, what people are saying may not actually be the reason why they're against it. And so something that I think a lot about is there may be a lot of reasons why this person is against supportive housing, and it really could come from their own beliefs about people who are experiencing homelessness. But how do I take this moment to listen to what they're saying, pivot, and speak to the larger group? I may not be able to get that person who just thinks they're not going to see the structural reasons that people are experiencing homelessness. But I can use that moment to help others in the room see the structural reasons. We all know it's expensive to live here. We all want to be able to walk down the street and enjoy our coffee shops. And when everyone has a place that they can live, we can all be enjoying that, including the people who are now, living in a safe, healthy home. So the art of the pivot, it can be one where I take a deep breath. I'm really, looking for a way to make the pivot, but I find it to be the most useful tool that we've got.
I love it. I love it. And you hit on something too. We were talking about this in the session. Sometimes when you're faced with some of these negative comments or folks are talking at you and you're like, oh boy, they've gone into a whole nother zone. I got to bring them back. I got to pivot out of where they are and bring them back to the conversation. Sometimes it takes a moment to be able to do that, like to right? And so we talked about some of the strategies, like if you're in a public meeting and you got to just kind of catch your breath, to just drop the pen, right? Just signature move. Let me drop the pen, just to give me a chance to kind of like pick up the pen, collect my thoughts, figure out how to like take what I've been given, right? Find something I agree with, and then turn it back around so I can go back into the narrative that is my own. So we just talked about some of those signature moves. So I want to ask you if you think about what are some of those signature moves that you use, like whether it's just generally general case making, or when you're trying to make that pivot and you just need a minute in your head, like as you're talking to somebody, just turn it around, like, okay, let me figure out how I'm going to do this. Let me just cough. Actually, can you give me a drink of water, or whatever it is? Like, what's your signature move that you use to do that?
One, I let them finish what they're saying, because typically people will keep going on and on. And my instinct is to say, okay, thank you, and to dive right in there. And sometimes I just let them keep going for a minute until I've got the wheels connecting in my brain of how I'm going to pivot. And I also try to take some pressure off of myself and know that every moment isn't the moment. I will get better and better, and be patient. And any positive statement right now is going to be the right thing. And I'll keep working at it.
That's right. That's right. So I want to ask you our last sort of formal question of the day in terms of our conversation. But I want to just take it back to our justice journey, right? When you talked at the very beginning about what's the justice journey that you're on, talk to me a little bit about what you see as what's next, both for you in terms of that justice journey, but also for the organization that you are the steward of. Like, you steward the resources of an amazing organization, CHAPA. I've worked with, almost everybody in your organization through and through, and I know what an amazing team you have. What's the next phase of the justice journey that you all are on?
We are so excited about the next phase. We are at this moment where everyone is talking about housing, and we are fully ready for this moment. We have a lot to say. We've been planning for it for a long time. And so we are doing this in a whole variety of ways. We are launching a campaign actually for lots of people to join in, for this to be the landing spot to get behind the campaign for the 200,000 homes that this state needs over the next 6 years, and for those homes to be affordable across income levels. So that's something that's really exciting, a place to harness all of that interest and help to guide people to how they can show their support for this and how they can act, and a variety of ways to do that. We're also thinking about our next set of research and housing policies. A lot of the work that we've been doing over the last 10 years is really coming into fruition. We are seeing policy changes that we have worked on for so long that are now law and getting implemented. Now we are working on what's next. What is the next set of housing policies that's really going to get us on that path where everybody will have that safe, healthy, affordable home, where they can live wherever they choose, where every community is a community that is invested in. So we are energized beyond belief about this moment.
Love it. Love it. Well, there it is, folks. You have heard Fierce Case Making right in the house today. Love it. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being my guest today. I just say y'all are doing just amazing, fantastic work. I hope that you all know that. Again, when I go across the country, the thing that I'm listening for all the time is when I hear really good case making. I always say I'm a connoisseur of case making. I can hear it and spot it way across the room. Like, somebody over there is making a great case. I got to get there. And you have become, over a number of years, one of my absolute favorite case makers. You are a fierce case maker. So thank you for being on that journey with us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. You have boosted me for the rest of my day.
And what I'll say for those folks who are listening to us talk, we're going to put both Rachel's bio and CHAPA's information on our website, including where you can know more about the work and the campaign that you all have, anything you all want to share with our community of case makers. Please do share that. We're going to have it all on the website so that all of you can connect to the work that Rachel shared with us. And I just want to say, for those of you who are thinking about this work or trying to figure out how to be on your own sort of case making journey, the principles of case making work if you work them, right? Take the time, be inspired by what you heard today in terms of our fierce case maker today, and get on the journey, right, to make that fierce case making work for you, because we know that when we do that, we get to reimagine actually how justice wins. Thank you so much for joining us today, right? Stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know, every new conversation we have with a fierce casemaker gives me new energy for the road, and I hope that as you listen today, you felt the same way. You know, I believe in casemakers everywhere, and if you don't quite see the fierce casemaker in you just yet, hold on, just trust. Work those principles so that you can bring new champions to your justice journey. And if this information inspired you, then please be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that you can be one of the first folks who knows when a new episode is dropped. And until next time, stay fierce.